and the main character is going to be David. I really love David for honestly because he has so much variety as a character in the Bible. He's been through so many things that can relate to us in so many possible ways, right? And one of them is how David had respect for God. The way that David respected God was a way that many of us don't really know how to either. Because David, being such an amazing man, such a strong man, right? A man who could fight with he could fight with double swords. He could take down pretty much anything. He was a little kid and he took down Goliath, obviously with God's help, but he was a little kid and he took down Goliath, right? A giant. And even though he had all these capabilities, he was wise. He had God on his side as well. God would speak to him. They had this relationship. Even after all of this, David still trusted God in the most trivial of things, in the littlest of things, even though David had such amazing skill. And that's what I wanted to talk about. Do we depend on our skills or do we depend on God, no matter how good we are at what we do? And so my first point is I have the power to do it, but should I? So before we go into the two verses, I want to speak more about David and his background, right? So we can like fully understand what's going on here. David had the strength and power to kill giants. As we see in the Bible, it says that David finished off the race of the giants. After he became king, he went after the rest of the brothers of Goliath, and he finished off the Nephilim race, which is the giants, right? It's in the book of Enoch, which is a book separate from the Bible because of few situations. It explains what the Nephilim are, and essentially Goliath and his brothers are the Nephilim. They were one of the last ones, and so David finished them off, and he well eradicated or he made the Nephilim race extinct. So if David had the strength and power to kill these giants, as we see he killed the rest of them, Goliath being 9.19 feet. This is actually true. Goliath. Many people read the story of David and they're like, "Wow, he killed Goliath, a person that's bigger than him." But no, Goliath wasn't. David wasn't a 4'3" boy, and Goliath was not 6'7". It's like Goliath was 9.19 feet tall, and David was around 5'6", 5'5". Right, that's a big difference for someone to be brave enough to walk up to someone that tall and say, "I'm going to defeat you in God's name," and he does it. That's pretty impressive, right? And yet, even though David had had all these feats, he didn't get cocky. He didn't get high. He didn't get high spirited, right? He wasn't arrogant in what he did. And his brothers, and David's Goliath's brothers were around. So if Goliath was 9.19, it is actually said that Goliath was one of the smaller people in the family. He was one of the runts. So his brothers were going around 13 to 15 feet tall, way taller than Goliath. And David, obviously being slightly older, he still reached around the size of 5'11", 6 foot, 6 foot one. And David still faced off these giants, 15 feet, 13 feet, 14 feet, right? And he still killed them. He killed them. It says that he made them extinct. And David was able to do this, and people would say that he was so skilled. They would praise him to such a point that said that if the sword would stick to his hand, it would not come off. In 2 Samuel 23:10 is the quote that that verse comes from. So if David had all these skills, all these abilities, right, since a young boy fighting bears, fighting lions that were trying to take his sheep in the pastures when he was taking care of the sheep. If he had all these skills, all these capabilities, why would David depend on God's help when he was going up against Saul? He could have easily just gotten up with the men he had found, these all these exiled men that he became the leader of. It could have easily gone over there and taken him on himself, right? Why would he depend on God? And that's the thing I wanted to say here. David respects God because it said that in the second point, my second point is, do we defend ourselves from God's protection? And it said that David had the right to kill Saul, but he didn't. David had the right. So not only did David respect God by not wanting to kill Saul, he wasn't scared of Saul. He also had the right to. God wanted him to kill Saul. God wouldn't have mind if he killed Saul. But the thing is, David respects God to such a point that he said, "Why would I kill one of the Lord's anointed?" As it says in 1 Samuel 24:6. So David was saying that even if I have the skills, even if I can do it, even if God himself lets me do it, I am still not going to put up my hands against someone that God originally anointed. Because David had this certain respect for God, and he said that if God put him in charge, God will take him out of charge. So David was a man of his word. David was taking care of all these people. He was taking care of all these exiled people. He was living in mountains, living in caves, just because he did not want to touch one of God's anointed. God even gave him the chance. Saul went into a cave. He was sleeping, right? And then David found him, and he still didn't kill him. And the second time, Saul went into a cave. He was going to the bathroom in a cave, and David, instead of killing him, he pulls off a piece of his clothes and he shows Saul what he could have done. And even then, Saul still decided to try and kill him. But the point is, David having so many opportunities to do so, he still didn't do it. How many times have we had the opportunity with our own skills to do what we wanted? And we do it, and then how does it end up? It messes up a plan that we had in the future. It messes up something that we wanted to do. And since we did it beforehand, we messed up the time that it was supposed to be done. We could do it. We have free will. God gave us free will, which is one of the reasons why we're here, right? We have free will. God gave us the free will because he didn't want robots to worship him. He wanted us as human beings based on our own free will and love for him to worship him. And he gave us this free will. So we can do essentially whatever we want, but it doesn't really benefit us, does it? So if David had these skills to kill Saul and he didn't, why would I, if I had the skills to say if I can run a marathon, right? But in this specific day that I can run this marathon, there's a whole other situation going on in church, and I have to go. But I can still run this marathon, and just do that instead of doing this because I have the skills to do it, and I have the skills to run it fast enough to reach the event in church probably like halfway through. Should I do it? Well, that depends on your relationship with God. Because if we respect God, what we would essentially say is that I can do this, I can run it with even maybe a world record and get back here by the time maybe halfway through the sermon. But God should always come first, shouldn't he? So if I respect God, if I respect what he can do, that means that I should also betray my own skills, my own capabilities, and depend on him instead of depending on what I can do. Because we're human beings. These capabilities might be handy at some times, but then when we want to use it against God's will, and we do it perfectly, it might still end up failing. Why? Because it wasn't God's will. The path that we walk on, right? There is no path. There's no right path. And people, when I tell people this, they get so confused. They're like, "Why is there no right path? Isn't life about the wrong and the right path?" No. The right path, there is no right path. God is the right path. So God doesn't have control of your path because God is your path. God should be your path, right? God, we shouldn't say God is in control of my life. God is in control of my way. God is in control of my steps. No, because our steps should be based on God in the first place. He shouldn't have to control it if I'm already with him. He shouldn't have to control it if I'm already walking based on his instructions. And that's why so much stuff happens to us, because we forget that God should be our path and we decide to make a good path. Because this good path likes to branch into many ways. When we're walking in this good path, we end up at a fork in the road, and then there's a bad path and a good path. But little do we know that the bad path and the good path are the same thing, because the good path is based on our will. If the good path is based on our will, and our will is wavering as human beings, that means that our good path will turn it later, sooner or later, it will turn into the bad path. That's why our path should always be with God. That's why our path is God, and it would always be God, right? So David, following all these points, all these rules, thinking about all this in his mind, he was thinking that God doesn't control my path. God is not in control of my life right now, because God is my life. I'm hiding in this cave, and God is my life. God is not in control of this situation because God is this situation. God made this situation happen so that Saul can get off from being the king, and I could be king afterwards. It's all a matter of patience. So our patience is what essentially leads us to having respect for God. Because in our times, as human beings, we want everything quickly, right? I come downstairs at 3 a.m. in the morning when my mom falls asleep because I want a midnight snack, and I stand in front of the microwave, and I'm anxious to get what's inside the microwave, so I'm just like in front of the microwave's like spinning, and I'm just standing there, And then sometimes when it's like 3 minutes, I get tired like around 50 seconds. I pull it out and I eat it cold because I get impatient, right? So if we do that with a microwave, imagine how we are with God, right? Like, God, I want this car. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. God, where's my car? 5 years, 6 years. God, where's my car? But your interest wasn't high enough to have this car. So why are you begging God to give you this car sooner than He should if you're gonna be broke by the time you buy it? Like, we have to wait for God's perfect timing, because God's perfect timing involves factors that we're not involving. Like, God, I want a girlfriend. God, I want a wife. I already want one now. I want one now, but you can't even clean your own socks, man. Like, you can't even do your own laundry. Come on. She's gonna move out of the house. Like, you don't get married to have a slave in the house. You get married to have a supporter. You get married to have a relationship, a best friend, that. But you don't get married to have a slave in the house. If you can't do the dishes, why would God give you a wife or a girlfriend? Like, that makes no sense. We forget so many factors when we ask stuff from God. So that's why God takes His time to involve those factors in our life and give us those factors, so that then what He gives us is valid. Because if He gives us something beforehand, it's not valid, because it'll break down, or it'll go away, or it will finish off before you can even enjoy the fruits of it. So we should ask God, regardless of our own skills, what He wants. And point 3 is that, do we ask God regardless of our own skills? Right? So here we're going to start going to Psalm 143:11, and it says, for your name's sake, Lord, preserve my life. In your righteousness, bring me out of trouble. So David, we can see here, as now that we describe David's background a bit, David taking down so many giants, David fighting off around hundreds of men by himself, right? He was able to take down these tens of thousands of armies with the rest of his partners, right? But David could easily take down like at least 20 men by himself. And even though he could do all of this, he had all these skills, he had all this opportunity in his life, he still asks for God to preserve him, to see him in his righteousness, to get him out of trouble, even though he could get himself out of trouble. And that's what we think most of the time. Oh, I can get myself out of trouble, I can do this, and then I do it, and then I'm in bigger trouble. And then I do it, and I'm in bigger trouble. And then we say that, God, I don't need you, but then after trying so many times, where do we find ourselves? Where do we find ourselves, guys? On our knees praying, or do we not? We find ourselves on our knees praying because we thought we could do it ourselves, and then around 2 hours later, or maybe if the situation is bigger, maybe a month later, after trying my whole way, the way I wanted to do it, ironically, we still find ourselves praying, no? So why shouldn't I save myself all this trouble and just ask God in the first place? Confidence and arrogance is essentially the base of all sin. Because if I'm arrogant and I am confident in myself that I can do this, then I'll also be confident in myself to kill someone, and I'll also be confident in myself to steal, and I'll also be confident in myself to hurt other people, and I'll also be confident in myself to lie, and etc. If I'm confident in myself, that means I'll be super confident in myself to sin as well. Because sinning is easy. And if I'm confident in sinning as well, on top of sinning being easy, then we're going to live a whole life full of sin. So if confidence and arrogance is the base of everything, then what is the opposite of that? Humbleness, which is what David had. David could have said, nah, I fought all these people. I killed almost half of the Philistines. We pretty much have them in a corner right now. They don't come against us at all. The only reason why we're in this problem is because there's basically currently a civil war in Israel right now. And this is the only reason why this is going on. I could easily just go over there and take his life. You know what? Let's go do it, guys. He could have done that. It's simple as that. And he had God to back him too, because that's what God wanted him to do. But did he do it? No. Why? Because he was humble. There's a difference between low self-esteem and being humble. Low self-esteem is the thing that I can't do it. I can't do this. It's not possible for me. It's impossible. I can't do it at all. I look at it and I fail. I will fail before I even try. And you have zero confidence in your skills. Humbleness is having the confidence in your skills, but using it at the right time. Knowing the right timing to use it. So if I'm humble, as David was in this situation, then from a child's perspective, from a son's perspective, I'm going to use an example here. If I'm humble, right, like David, when my mom yells at me because of something I did wrong, am I going to reply back to her with something that she did wrong? No, right? Having the capability to tell her, but you did this, which taught me to do this, and that's why I did it. Instead of doing that, I can stay quiet and receive the instruction and be like, yes, I did it. She did it too, but that's besides the point because I will be benefited. All right, even though there are parents, that doesn't mean they have to be perfect. And that also doesn't mean that they should also have an excuse not to be perfect. But they aren't. That's the base of humanity. They don't control that. We don't control our sin. Our parents don't control their sin. The whole world doesn't control their sin because they don't come to God with their problems, right? So even if I have the capability, I can shut my mom up like this because she did something wrong, and she's telling me the exact thing I did wrong. Why would I tell her what she did wrong if I could just stay quiet, receive the instruction, and not make the same mistake later? Her in her own time, she can make sure what happens to her, and she can go fix it with God in her own time. But she is currently instructing me on something I did wrong, so I should accept that, even though I have the capability and the skill and the opportunity to tell her otherwise, right? So if I have the opportunity to go against the law for some random reason, maybe something happened and the officer was at fault. If your life is not at stake, if nothing happened to you, right, and the officer made a mistake, why would I just go and make a big old fuss about it in court? If you're okay, then just drive away. There's no problem, right? It's like if I, even though I have the capabilities to go against the law for some whatnot reason, the law is there for a reason. And if maybe one officer messed up on that law, that doesn't mean that all of them are going to mess up on the same thing. So I should go over there and make a big fuss about it. I have the opportunity to go against it, but should I? Is it going to benefit me? Will it benefit me? And let's not say for the good of the people, because most of us always lose these kind of reasons anyways, right? Because we start saying, for the good of everyone around me, I'm going to do this. And then we end up doing it for our own selfish desires. Because that's how we are, we're human beings. So David, regardless of everything that was going on, regardless of his reputation of killing giants, regardless of his reputation of being a massacre of armies, regardless of his reputation of being a skilled swordsman, he decides to ask God regardless of his own skills. So we need to ask for the Lord's help even if we are strong and agile and intelligent enough, because the Lord always has the solution. Even if we're intelligent enough, even if we're smart enough, even if we're skilled enough, maybe sometimes we can't fix it. And it's good to have confidence in your capabilities, yeah. But then once your capabilities fail you and you only have confidence in your capabilities, then you're going to panic and you're going to end up in a worse situation. Instead, we should put our confidence on God in the first place, who will then enhance our capabilities to be able to fix the situation through his help. And that's the thing here. That's the thing I love about David. When I read the Bible, many people ask me why I get so excited sometimes, and it's because I pull in all the factors, the actual facts. People read that David killed Goliath. Okay, that's cool, but they didn't know that Goliath was straight up 9.19 feet tall, right? And they say that David killed the rest of his brothers. They didn't know that they were between 13 and 15 feet tall. That's tall, like very tall. And I put in all these factors, and then when I read the sad parts of David in Psalms, I'm like, wow, this man being able to destroy like these giant, massive people that are like basically equal to hundreds of men, and he's still in a cave on his knees praying for help because he wants God's support in all of this. He doesn't want to do it by his own will. That is a man with the heart of God, right? So this explains so much why God said that David is his friend, because David he's crazy pretty much. If I was capable of doing all of this, me personally in my own flesh, if I was David, I would have just gone over there and chopped Saul's head off. Like, if I can do it, why am I here in a cave for so many years hiding? I would get impatient because I am impatient. And so we always ask God for things, for stuff, for benefits, but we never ask for his mercy. We always ask him, and that's point number 4. It says ask for God's mercy. And we always ask him for things, for benefits, as if we deserve them, And we don't ask him for mercy because we mess up all the time. I want God to bless me with a house, but how are you behaving? If I'm yelling at my wife and messing around, making a mess in the house, going over there to work, making a mess of God's reputation of what Jesus did on the cross for me, for my sins, and I go and I behave bad in work, proving to everyone that Jesus is false, because they're going to think that Jesus is false if I'm behaving like a false prophet. So I go to work and I behave like that, and then I go home and I behave like that. Or maybe as a son, I go home, I yell at my mom, I answer her back to whatever she wanted me to do. I don't do my chores, I don't do anything that I wanted to do, but I still have the audacity to ask for a new pair of shoes. Or maybe a new outfit, or maybe etc., right? Anything that we want. And so we come to God and we tell him, God, I want this, but how are you behaving? Instead, it should be, God, have mercy on me. Let me change this. Let me change this in order to have this. Because if I can't change my old ways, if I have a speeding problem and I want God to give me a Mustang that has like a V12 engine, will he give it to me? No, because he doesn't want me to kill myself. If I can understand the point between knowing how to drive this car in the track and knowing how to keep it safe on the road, then God will give it to me. But he's not going to give me a car with over 3,000 horsepower so I can go kill myself in the freeway going 200 miles an hour. Right? So if we don't change our own ways, if this in here doesn't change, why would God give us something that will benefit that's what's in here? And the speeding problem is me. I know I'm never going to have a sports car until I'm like old and I know how to control my speeds, because I love speeding. It's something I've loved since I was little. So I am never going to have like a really buff car. I know my parents are never going to let me buy something like that, even if I'm 25, 27. But that's the point. If we don't fix what's in here, how is God going to give us something that enhances what's in here? If my flesh loves to do stuff that I love to do, and God wants me to change that thing that my flesh likes to do, why would he give me something that will encourage me to do what my flesh likes to do? That makes no sense. If my problem is going home and playing video games instead of doing my homework, why would my parents want to buy me a new console so I can keep playing more video games without doing my homework? Right? I should get grounded instead and get the console taken away until I get better grades, which is what essentially God does with us. But what do we get? We get mad. We get mad. Why do we get mad? Because our brains are too small to understand his reason. And that's why we have to respect God. Because even though we don't know what's going on in his mind, even though we don't know what's going on in his perspective, we should always respect his perspective. Because our perspective isn't the perspective of seeing everyone's life at the same time. Like, he is omnipresent. He's everywhere. So if I'm not everywhere, how can I argue with someone who's everywhere? He sees everything. He sees the conversations that go on behind your back. He sees the conversations of people insulting you behind your back, and then you complain why this friend left your side. Maybe because God saw conversations that this friend was having about you behind your back. If I'm complaining that my relationships are horrible because people always leave me, then maybe it's because those people that left you were God's will that they left you, because they were going to hurt you. That's why we always have to respect God, because we don't see the full perspective. I really like that thing I said, that one sermon, where I said that I was doing English this one time, right? I do pace. My school is based on paces, so I was doing paces, and my English pace showed me that there's first perspective, second perspective, third perspective, basic, right? But when we apply it to something complicated, like understanding God's point of view, then that means that God would have the third perspective, because he sees the situation going on, and he's the narrator of the situation. First perspective is the person who's going through it. Second perspective is maybe the person who's helping you through it. But the third perspective is the narrator, the person who sees it all at the same time, the person who's making the story, the person who's shaping the character. So that's why we need to respect God, because we don't have a third perspective. We can strive for a second perspective. We can think about what people are going through so that we can sympathize with them and not cause a bigger problem and argue with them. We can do that. But we can't get a third perspective because we didn't create the world. So we always have to ask for God's mercy. Instead of asking for things, we should ask for God's mercy to fix what's internal in our hearts so that we can actually have what we want to have. God's not going to help you if you're wallowing in your sin. God's not going to help you if you're smothered in sin, right? So, in the end, after the beginning of this question, which is, who should I respect? In the end, the last point is, God should be the answer. God should be the answer to all forms of respect. If we respect God, then we can treat anyone with the same love God treats us. And God always helps the humble, therefore your answer should be God. If I respect God, that means I can respect my peers. If I respect God, that means I can respect my fellow students. If I respect God, I can respect my parents. If I respect God, I can respect my spouse. Even in the smallest of things. If I respect God, I can respect the speed limit. If I respect God, I can respect the law. If I respect God, I can respect authority. So all those people that you see around there messing with authority, yelling at people, answering back to people, and making a mess of things, that you can see in their hearts that they don't respect God. So how would an unbeliever feel if they saw a believer messing around with the rules? The first thing they would ask themselves is, didn't God create the rules? Because that's what I would ask myself. If I saw my dad doing something he's not supposed to do, that's the first thing I'd ask myself. Didn't he teach me how to do this? If he taught me to do this right, why is he doing it wrong? That's exactly what I'd ask myself. So if your friend that's an unbeliever, you tell him about the 10 Commandments and then you go and you break 5 of them, he's going to say, didn't he tell me to follow the 10 Commandments? What is going on here? So maybe the reason why things are not going our way is because we need to fix what's inside of us first. And we need to ask for his mercy instead of asking for things that will benefit the cause of sinning, that will benefit the cause of messing up, that will benefit the cause of doing wrong. Because as I said in the first place, there's no good path. God is our path. So if God is our path, that means we should respect God. Because if we don't, then maybe that's why we're in problems right now. Because God's trying to give us character development. You don't want to respect me? Then I'll make you respect me. Because you entered Christianity on your own free will. Now you have to deal with the rules. If you want eternal life, you have to go through the suffering. And David went through a lot of suffering. He spent many, many years hiding from cave to cave. He was betrayed by his own men even after that. And after that, he fell into sin and didn't know what to do with himself. But then in the very end, he taught his child, which was one of the best kings in all of Israel, who expanded the kingdom of Israel to such a level that it could maybe even compete with the early Roman Empire. Not the Holy Roman Empire, because that was pretty big, but with the early Roman Empire, that's how big Israel got to that point, was Solomon. So David went through all this suffering, through all these experiences. Why? So he can stop Solomon from doing the exact same mistakes he did. And that's why Solomon made such a big impact on this kingdom. Even though he did fail later on, but that's besides the point, right? Where David, for me, I like to relate to him a lot because when I am going through trouble, I read this book and I can identify with it. And today, I hope you guys identified with this too. And also, when you guys read the Bible, if it's struggling for you guys to get excited about it and get interested into it, search up the facts of what you're reading because some of it has already been found. And if you read it, then you might understand it more and you might be like, wow, so that is pretty cool. Because the Red Sea, if you look at pictures, before I thought the Red Sea was like a little pond, pretty much. It was like a river. I was like, okay, the Red Sea is like Lake Mead. No, the Red Sea is the Red Sea. That thing's big. And Moses put a stick in it, and it split apart. That's cool. So if we struggle in getting into God's Word, then we should probably research on it. And in the end, always ask for God's help. And if we respect God, then God will always be on our favor. So there we are. Get up. Today's sermon is now over. I ask that we learn something that we apply to our lives, right? And so there you are. Bow your heads down. We're going to pray. Ask God to help you. Ask God to give you respect for his name. There we are. Ask God to help you with whatever you're going through. Maybe ask for forgiveness for not asking him for mercy and just asking him for riches. Lord, I give you thanks for this day, Father. I give you thanks for everything that we've been able to do today. I give you thanks for everything that we've been able to learn today. Father, I give you thanks for putting this word in my heart. I give you thanks, Lord, for putting this word in my heart and my mind, Lord, so that I can tell others about it. Father, I ask that this word may touch people's hearts, may touch people's lives, may fix some problems that they were trying to find. Maybe it might help them, Lord, fix some situations that we're going through. Father, I ask, Lord, in this moment, Lord, that you help us always remember that you're always there, and that if we respect you, everything will go okay. Father, I ask, Lord, that everything that we do be based on your word. Everything that we do be based on your commands. Everything that we do be based on your orders, Lord. Father, help us not ask for things that will encourage our sin if we haven't fixed that in the first place. Father, open our minds, open our eyes, open our ears, open our wisdom, our understanding, so that we can fix whatever we have to fix before coming into your presence, Lord. Father, let us be the example to the unbelievers, Father. As it says in Romans, let us be what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Let us prove that to them. Let us show that to them. And to do that, Father, let us always walk on the right path. Not the good path, not the right path, but the godly path. Let you be our path, Lord. Let us follow you as our path, Father. Let you be the only source of our lives, Lord. Let us run to you, Lord. And there we are, just pray to him, just speak to him.